A reading rainbow. A reading rainbow.
If you had any interest in mystery as a kid, there is one name that surely stands out above all the rest. Not Sherlock Holmes, not Jessica Fletcher, not even Mystery Incorporated. I'm talking, of course, about the great Leroy Encyclopedia Brown. The creation of Donald J. Sobel was first published in 1963 and was pretty much a rework from Sobel's previous series, 2-Minute Mysteries, made for a younger audience in mind. The books have received some criticism in present times, as will be the case of anything in the internet age. But the point is that Encyclopedia Brown helped teach kids deductive reasoning and critical thinking. And it was remarkably progressive for its time, given that the main character's sidekick was a girl that could beat people up. Encyclopedia Brown was another book series that I was fully engrossed in as a kid. So naturally, I geeked out when I found out a brief made-for-TV movie with a whole new adventure was made at the end of the 1980s, airing on HBO of all networks. Imagine my surprise years later to find out that movie was actually the pilot for a full series. Sort of. I'll get more into that series' production history later on, but for now, let's begin things with that pilot movie, Encyclopedia Brown and the Case of the Missing Time Capsule. We begin with our hero, Encyclopedia Brown, showing General Stonewall Jackson how to win the Civil War's first battle at Bull Run.
You could look it up. In 100 years or so.
Oh, that just might work.
Oh, Lord, I'm gonna get Tumblr on my ass. Of course, this turns out to just be our title character having daydreams that allow him to figure out the important clue for his latest mystery, which he goes to officially solve in front of an entire audience at the home clubhouse of the local street gang, the Tigers. Talk about not wanting home field advantage. This is because the case for Encyclopedia, who will simply be called EB in this series, is out to thwart the Tigers' leader, Bugs Meany, in his latest attempt to scam one of the kids in the neighborhood. This is actually taken from the Case of the Civil War Sword, one of the entries in the first Encyclopedia Brown book. It's all about how Bugs is trying to con one of EB's friends into trading him his bike for a supposedly authentic sword Stonewall was given after that battle. But EB deduces that it's fake because it actually says First Battle of Bull Run, despite the Confederates clearly never would have knowing there was going to be a second battle a year later. They leave out the other little detail that the Confederates would have called it the Battle of Manassas Junction, but what I'm really wondering is, how the frack could a kid like Bugs Meany have produced a forgery like that anyway? It doesn't really matter because we then immediately get the best part of the whole movie. EB's assistant, Sally Kimball, beating the crap out of Bugs.
Bug.
Huh, who knew Sally Kimball was descended from Xena Warrior Princess? Once done with that, we then move on to the main story of the movie, which is the city of Idaville preparing for Heritage Day and the ultimate unveiling of a time capsule planted 100 years ago by its founder Ida Mae Claggett, whom the town renamed itself after her after she managed to stop a devastating Civil War battle on the town by planting a rose on the battlefield. Of course! Who knew that horticulture was the key to world peace? That's why we can't end the conflict in the Middle East. The desert makes it impossible to plant any flowers. But the day before the big celebration, we find out someone managed to break into Ida Mae's statue and steal the time capsule from inside it. When one of EB's business cards is found at the scene, this of course gets everyone to believe that Bugs Meany took the capsule in another vain attempt to set up EB for revenge, because this happened in every single book. Give him credit for being loyal to the source.
Only 4 people knew about that business card. Sally, my dad, me, and the thief.
And this is one disappointment that I have, as none of the other tigers from the books, like Rocky Graham or Duke Kelly, are ever shown here. About the only lackey Bugs seems to have is this one kid named Zool. Get your Ghostbusters jokes out of the way now, kiddies. Anyway, they find out all Bugs really took was a Tupperware dish containing a note from the real thief demanding $500,000 or else they'll destroy the time capsule. So yeah, long story short, it turns out the thief was a descendant of Ida Mae Claggett, who stole the capsule out of jealousy that he was just a lowly mechanic, and not only was his ancestor more well-known than him, but also his brother, who is a major rock star that teen girls like Sally go gaga over. Yeah, he stole the city's most valued treasure for attention. Where's Idaville's version of Nash Bozard? Now, the subsequent episodes were only half an hour long, while this was a 1-hour special. Hence, in the remaining episodes, we don't get padded action sequences, like EB nearly getting run down by a psycho mechanic in a semi. And even still, they took their sweet time on the rest of the series. There were apparently 8 episodes total, spread out over 3 years. Jeez, and Doctor Who fans get cranky when there's a delay in production. I wasn't able to track down all those episodes, but we can look at a couple other. The next one I found was the case of the burgled baseball cards, which is centered around some huge baseball card convention coming to Idaville, where the world's biggest collector is in town and being hounded by everyone wanting to buy from him. Primarily this gold digger with the worst fake southern accent I've ever heard, and trust me, that's saying something.
I can do it too. You see, I am rich.
This episode's gonna screw me over and have her not be the culprit, isn't it? Then we get this ex-Chicago Cubs star Corky Ladeo, played by G. Gordon Liddy?
Yeah, I like to go to shindigs like this. Helps me keep in touch, you know, with my fans.
How about an autograph, Cookie?
Why, sure, little buddy. I'm gonna be sitting right over there, signing away. $5 a pop. Of course, that's for charity.
You went from being Nixon's crony to having to do a guest role on a kids miniseries for a paycheck? I could do a non-stop loop of Nelson months laughing and it still wouldn't be enough. Eventually, we find out that, sure enough, the collector's whole hoard has been stolen. The first one to really be suspected is Ladeo, because
I liked your baseball story the other day, but something didn't make sense. You said the Cubs and the Yankees were battling for the pennant. They're in different leagues. They never play for the pennant. This is a Corky Lodato card from 1962. Why is it, Mr. Lodato, that I look at this card, says you're a lefty, and when I look at you, you're a righty?
yeah, it turns out this guy isn't Ladeo at all. Just some doppelganger that impersonates him at conventions for money and an ego boost.
I was gonna steal a Corky Lodato card, in case somebody looked at it, put 2 and 2 together like you did. I had it right in my hand, too. Then I thought how upset that guy'd be, so I put it back.
So you're still guilty of fraud. Jeez, Liddy must have been so desperate for money at this time. It's so delicious. But yeah, they do reveal that the gold digger was the thief all along. Okay, 50 points to this episode.
Oh my gracious! Oh.
Game's over, ma'am.
Case closed. You did it, E.B.
The cards! The cards! I want the cards!
Nice work, son.
I guess what you said proves you were wrong, Miss Valentine.
About what?
Congrats, kid! Now all of those cards are no longer mint condition. I expect the collector spent the rest of the days in the nut house over the fortune he lost. The only thing worse would be if he invested in Bitcoin. The next episode we have is The Flaming Beauty Queen. Nope, you all know my stance on those jokes by now. It starts with E.B. looking to thwart another of his longtime adversaries, a con artist always looking to scam kids out of their money. Though he's called Jinx Healy in the show, when this character was called Wilford Wiggins in the books. And here he's also a member of Bugs Meany's Tigers. That's kind of a plot point here, because after E.B. thwarts his scheme, he supposedly gets kicked out of the gang and wants Sally to help him enact revenge. Suffice it to say, it was all another one of Bugs Meany's setups. Moving on. Anyway, the main plot is all about some beauty queen being accused of trying to burn down the library because fires keep starting up in the main office, and she's being accused of such arson by the main librarian, who also happens to be Bugs Meany's cousin.
Stand up, everybody! Let go, Pinky! Everything's under control!
Sally, don't forget about the...
Sally, where's the...
Anyone hurt, dear?
Yeah, it's at this time I might as well bring up the kids' parents in this show. E.B.'s mother, who I think in the books was a retired English teacher, or at least was an English major in college, is changed into a nurse in the TV show because whatever. Meanwhile, E.B.'s dad is still the Idaville chief of police, but... yeah, looks like his great-great-grandfather was Wilton Parmenter. What is it with these kids' mystery shows and the somehow need to add slapstick? Who the frack wrote this episode? Savage Steve Holland? The co-creator of Eek the Cat? How can something that makes so much sense make my brain hurt? Oh, and the titular flaming beauty queen in this episode? She's played by Elizabeth Kaitan, whose prior credits include Friday the 13th Part 7, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, and Assault of the Killer Bimbos. Anyway, it turns out the real culprit in this case is no culprit at all. Turns out Miss Idaville here is just a clumsy, vain bubblehead who won't be seen in public wearing the glasses she needs, so she'd been putting them down at the exact same spot in the office where the sunlight would catch the lens and, well, you know how kids used to fry ants with a magnifying glass? Yup.
You see, Dad, the glasses started the fire, and Darlene, fearing not pleasing her public, chose to hide the fact that she was blind as a bat by hiding her glasses, basically harboring the criminal. This is one case where beauty was the beast.
You know, you guys were making a TV series on HBO in the early 90s. You didn't need to shove some whole beauty is skin deep message here. I'll admit rewatching these episodes left me a little disappointed. Maybe the obvious VHS rips I found for copies were partly to blame, but the video quality and acting performances do look really cheap for a show that was airing on a premium cable network even back then. Still, I do give them credit for creating whole new mysteries instead of just solely adapting the ones from the books. You probably could have gotten away with doing that. So it is a nice touch they instead decided to put more effort into that area. Perhaps more effort could have been put into everything else as well. But it is still nice to remember there was a time when HBO had content for everyone, and they weren't just taking advantage of the premium cable status to try and be as edgy as possible. Looking at you, Game of Thrones. It's definitely not easy to find what few episodes were made, so maybe it is time for Encyclopedia Brown to get a reboot for the small screen with a little better production. Even still, what they tried wasn't terrible for sure. I've seen far worse adaptations made out of my childhood. Which brings us to next time. Strap in, my rowdy friends. Next week is gonna hurt.